and welcome back to our last video on creating dramatic conflict in your stories. And today we are going to be covering creating conflict with surroundings and situations. This is an almost limitless source of conflict if you use it wisely. It can cover a variety of things. The only limit is your imagination, but I'm going to cover a few of the basics for you now. Let's start easy. Let's start with weather. This can include severe heat, torrential rain that floods a house or road, maybe a snowstorm that cuts your protagonist off from civilization and from help. What about a hurricane or a massive storm, an earthquake or a volcanic eruption? Imagine what all these things could do to your main character and the situation around them. Imagine all the things that you could do with that. Okay, let's think about surroundings. Okay, what about where your protagonist lives? Do they live in a little village where they're really protected and sheltered? Do they live in a city where they never feel safe? Do they live in a country where their lives are very regimented and restricted? Do they live in a dystopian world where lawlessness reigns? What about if they lived in a jungle away from civilization and they couldn't get help that they needed, or if they were under attack? Next, let's think about the state of the world that they live in. What if they were in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? Okay, how would that change their lives? What would they have lost? What if they were in a world where it hadn't rained in years, like barely any food grows and they're rationed on the amount of water they can have? What if the people of the world had rebelled and killed the people in power? The government was gone, there's no royal families, and there's no one making or upholding the laws. About technology. What if we had lots more technology than we do now? Which is, to be honest, is really hard to think about, isn't it? What if everything was controlled by computers, like even more than it is now? The people in charge could pick the time that you wake up, the time that you go to work, the jobs that you do, where you can live, who you're allowed to marry, everything. Does sound very 1984, doesn't it? But, you know, you could make that work. Just because someone's done a story like that doesn't mean that you can't make it work. What if we went into a technology blackout and everything that contained some kind of computer stopped working completely? Only older cars would work. Phones and internet would be gone. No one would have access to their money, you know, because we all use cards these days. No music unless you had a record player or like a tape player. No shopping from home. So many people would be screwed. What about setting your story in the past, but with the technology that we have now? So like steampunk on steroids. Okay. What about setting your story in an alternative universe or a timeline where we're in the modern day with no technology? What if we never even had any? What about time travel? So someone from the 1800s is found frozen on top of a mountain, and when global warming kicks in, they thaw out and like come wandering down in town, and they're suddenly shocked at how the world's changed. There is so much you can do if you let your imagination have free rein. Just remember to keep it as realistic as possible, because even though your readers might love fantasy or sci-fi, they still need to be able to imagine themselves in the MC role, or for it to be realistic enough that they can imagine it happening and they can find it relatable. I got distracted by a little birdie outside, sorry. What about creating conflict due to the society that they live in? So what about if they live in a really, like a majorly tolerant society where no one is abused or picked on at all? Everyone can be exactly who they want to be without fear of repercussions or fear of discrimination or being picked on. Their world is used to people being different, so it's almost expected, okay? So how could you make that work as conflict? Maybe you could have a character so boring and mundane, like so vanilla, that everyone around them is actually intolerant to them instead of the other way around. Maybe they're the intolerant one. and they try to incite hate and abuse, but no one agrees with them. So instead, the world turns on them, and they're hunted and picked on instead of the person they were aiming it at in the first place. What about a world where mental illness isn't shunned, but it's embraced? Where depression is seen as normal, and because of it, people are actually happier. And so, as a result, there kind of ends up being less depression anyway. So imagine that instead of trying to cure mental illness, we learn to live with it. And we change our expectations and our understanding of it. So that's now the norm. If people weren't constantly struggling to fit in with how society expects them to be, if they weren't always constantly striving to be normal, how would that affect them? How much would society change? How much better would they feel? As a result of this, they've adapted their lives to accommodate all kinds of mental health issues. We've adapted society to allow people the support and attention they need without struggling for it. And again, as a result, we've got less stress, less worry, less abuse, and so we're more at peace. The idea being that support and acceptance is better than a cure in the long term. Or, switcheroo, do they live in a super intolerant controlled society where being different is frowned upon and all individuality is stamped out? What if your character is the only LGBT plus person in the entire city and they fear that they're never going to find love until they hear a very incomplete rumour about a village in another country that is just for them? What would they risk to get there? What would they go through for a chance to find love? Let's hit into my world here, the world of supernatural and fantasy, because that could be included as society, surroundings, and probably nature too. What if it's a world where the supernatural is commonplace, where different beings walk amongst the humans and everyone, in general, lives in harmony? What if it's the other way around, and the supernatural beings are seen as second-class citizens, where they're rounded up and put into prisons or workhouses because they're seen as dangerous and abominations? Is your protagonist one of the supernaturals who's trying to change the world to help out other beings, or are they against paranormals and they want to help wipe them out? Because remember, no one said your protagonist has to be a good person. Or maybe they start off being against enhanced beings, and maybe after a bad experience with them in their past, and slowly they learn to accept and understand them. Maybe it's because they were forced into becoming one, or they fell in love with one. Maybe they'd always been one, and they'd been forced into it when they were younger, and they've been hiding ever since, working against them in an effort to protect others from the same fate. Let's change it up. Maybe the supernaturals are the ones in charge, and the mortal humans are the ones that are enslaved to them. Maybe mortals have little to no rights, and the paranormals use and abuse them. Your story could be about a supernatural that's always believed mortals to be weak and pathetic, falling in love with one, and then realising that humans are just as strong, if not stronger, and more than worthy enough. Maybe we're going to hit into sci-fi territory, and we're going to have a book set on an alien planet. Maybe your protagonist crash landed there or was abducted. Maybe they found an alien on Earth and they have to help get them back. Maybe there was a love connection there too. What about a society that encourages the pairings of supernatural or alien creatures with humans? In fact, they made it law as a way of integrating and assuring the survival of the races. What if the government created a program that used DNA and genetics to pair up humans and other beings for marriage when they reached a certain age? How would your characters cope with an arranged marriage? Would they fight against it, or would they go with it and try to make the best out of it? You aren't limited to just one type of conflict when writing your stories. What if you combined supernatural beings with a natural disaster? What if you added some inner turmoil and personal sabotage with a paired mating, and no matter what they try, it doesn't work out, but divorce isn't allowed? Could you blend an authoritative antagonist with a place where technology rules? How could they use that technology against your protagonist? I would really, Really love to hear some of the ideas you come up with, or any stories that you've written with some of the examples that I've given here today or in other videos, because ideas are something that we should share and we should encourage. So feel free to use mine as writing prompts if you think that's going to help you write. I know that I've just come up with like millions of ideas here that I could possibly put in my stuff. So, you know, it's always good to talk. It's always good to talk about your ideas, and it's always good to brainstorm and just go with things and give it a go. I hope that this series has given you a bit of a better understanding on how to create conflict in your work. Until next time, blessed be and happy writing.